This is addressed specifically to Dave Lochbaum. At a recent Massachusetts State House hearing, a speaker representing one of the nearby General Electric MK1 boiling water reactors claimed that his atomic power plant is configured differently from the Fukushima MK1s. Insofar as the spent fuel pool is not on top, but rather to one side of the plant's reactor core. Is that an accurate claim, and would that matter in terms of the consequences of a similar emergency scenario?
I profess embarrassment for my colleague, who apparently doesn't know much. The spent fuel pool is not on top of the reactor at Fukushima either. It's not that place anywhere, so it is different because none of them are that way. The spent fuel pool at every Mark I containment, no matter what country it's in, is to the side of the reactor vessel. You have to get the top off of the reactor vessel to be able to access the fuel inside. So if the spent fuel pool were there, it'd be kind of in the way. So they moved it to the side. GE's not dumb. They moved it to the side so they could get to the fuel inside the reactor vessel, lift it up and move it over to the spent fuel pool. It's in that place in every Mark I BWR on the planet, including the one he works at.
Now, why did they do that? This is because I started work in 1972, and I asked, why is the fuel pool right next to the reactor? And the alternative would be if it were down at grade. And they were afraid of draining the reactor as they were moving the fuel down. So that the logic at the time, and there was logic, it may not have been great logic, but it was logic. By putting them at the same point, you couldn't drain the reactor, whereas if they were at different heights, in theory, you could. Now they have valves and things like that and allow that transfer to occur pretty routinely. But there was a reason they did it back in 1971.
Okay. Seems to me this is a question any or all of you might want to comment on. What explains the NRC's current inability to enforce its own regulations?
June 4th, 1998. I was sitting at the commission table directly across from NRC Chairman Jackson when I was using the usual bit whining about the NRC. And she slammed the table and said, if I really believed that, I'd go up to Capitol Hill. And I didn't understand at all why she was mad at me for that reason. Turns out that morning, she had received word that the Senate threatened to cut the NRC's budget by 40%. 500 NRC workers would have been laid off very rapidly. The Senate at that time was controlled by Senator Domenici from New Mexico, who was somewhat of an ally of the nuclear industry. The previous year, 1997, 9 U.S. reactors were shut down the entire year to fix safety issues. Chairman Jackson was a regulator. She did enforce the regulations. The plants that didn't meet the regulations did not operate. Pretty simple. The industry didn't like that, so they went to Congress and said, we need to knock this off. So Congress threatened to cut the NRC's budget by 40% unless they stopped doing their job. So it was either lose your job or stop doing your job. They chose the latter. They stopped enforcing in 1999. They haven't enforced many regulations since then. So I criticized the NRC. If they had a spine, they would have resisted the congressional pressure that gave into it. But if you look at MMS or Securities and Exchange Commission, any regulatory body that tries to enforce the regulation, Congress tells them to knock it. Not Congressman Markey and others. There are some very strong allies. But unfortunately, the majority of the Congress is pro-business, anti-safety. So the NRC uses any excuse it has for not doing it. Protection of their jobs was the best one in that day.